Hi, everyone. This is Olga. We're going to talk about how to become a general counsel today. As you know, this is something that I deeply care about, has made an intentional journey to become one, have a theory of how one becomes, but also love talking to other aspiring general counsel or general counsel about their journey or about how they think about it. Because I think there's more than one way to become one. And we can learn together. It's definitely not something you're born with. It's something you become. It's a learned skill. And those who make an intentional journey to get there are much more likely to be successful than those sort of waiting for the lucky day. And so today I have a very special guest, David. Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Olga. I'm David Hamm. I am Senior Counsel Corporate at Summit Materials. Day-to-day, we support the board and its committees, our SEC filings, NYSE compliance, capital markets activity, and M&A activity. I'm also the co-chair of the in-house subcommittee of the NBA Corporate Governance Committee. It's a mouthful, but in connection with that, I'm doing a podcast called Conversations with GCs, and Olga is nice enough to have me on to talk about it.
Wow, it's my privilege to have you here. It makes me really excited when increasingly in-house lawyers show up publicly and share their thoughts and drive initiatives. Because up until recently, it was mostly outside lawyers who've done it. So I get excited when I see in-house lawyers like David, who are very actively sharing knowledge and encouraging, moving forward together. David, I have a number of questions, some of them about sort of how to become the general counsel, and some of them actually about what inspired you to do podcasts as an in-house lawyer, because I think that's a conversation that many folks will benefit from. Before we do that, let's set a context. Share a little bit more about your journey as in-house lawyer. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I practiced for about 10 years in firms and had been interested in moving in-house or putting on the jersey, as I talk about it on the podcast. And through a business development event, met my previous boss, and we hit it off. And it just so happened at that same time, his right-hand person left to go somewhere else, and he had a vacancy. And so it's just kind of right place, right time, which is kind of common how I got in the door. It was CenturyLink, then Lumen Technologies for 3 years in kind of the same space I'm in now in the corporate governance and transaction group. And each kind of year thinking more and more, being intentional about wanting to be general counsel and actually being willing to say it out loud, because it seems like a bit of a presumptuous thing at first.
I love the lesson of networking. At the time when you met, someone who would give you your first in-house opportunity, were you actually networking, or was it sort of was it intentional, or was it a happy accident?
This was actually a happy accident. I was intentionally networking on LinkedIn. One of my roles in-house, I was brought in a firm to build out a business transaction department, which meant I had to find the work to be able to do it. I'd always had just more work on my desk than I could do. And at that time, I started using LinkedIn. It was about 2016. And I intentionally reached out to any person I could. And so I was actively networking via LinkedIn. But this just happened to be a business development event that the firm put on that I had to go to. And I'm glad I did, because it worked out.
More work than you could do. Isn't that a story of a new lawyer life?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in-house, especially well in a law firm, I guess too. I like that you articulated that you would like to become a general counsel, and then I love the self-awareness where you mentioned, well, it's actually important to say it out loud, and it feels presumptuous. Tell me more. Tell me how you think about it, or seen others think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was pretty much the low lawyer at Lumen. We had about 100 lawyers. And that was the context in which I realized I wanted to be my boss's boss. But how do you go about saying that without, people thinking you're completely full of yourself? But eventually the circle, it started small, then it got bigger. as I kind of shared with people the roadmap, how I saw myself getting to that ultimate goal. And what I realized was the more people I talked to, particularly who were lawyers similarly situated, they had that same aspiration, but they had the same feeling. They kept it back because they felt maybe it was beyond them or a little too self-focused or ambitious. They didn't want to put it out there. So it was actually a great community of people that I realized there are a lot of folks like me who have that aspiration and might be afraid to say it out loud.
I think it definitely takes some courage. What did it take for you, or what you've seen for others, to actually come out and say it openly? What steps would you take to get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, having a plan, an incremental plan to get there. Obviously, you're not going to go from the low lawyer to general counsel of a Fortune 150 company in one day. So having a little bit of a roadmap that made logical sense made me a little more comfortable to talk about it. And then talking to people who you're comfortable with, who will, even if you're kind of out there, which I am a good bit, they kind of know where you're coming from and kind of help right size the path or help you think through the pros and cons.
And in that plan, do you have milestones or people to talk to, skills to learn, or how are you thinking? What is the plan? What is on David's plan?
Yeah. So it started with it's kind of several aspects, some educational goals. So when I made the initial plan in 2018. One of the milestones was getting an LLM in securities at Georgetown, which I'm in my last semester now. So that was a milestone. One of the milestones was I was one step removed from the GC. So getting to be a direct report to GC, which was my last move from Lumen to Summit. And now it's either the next step is becoming a GC or taking one more kind of VP step to that. But it's not as intentional as it should be, Olga, in the sense of learn this skill. I'm still trying to flesh it out. It's kind of a skeleton roadmap at this point. So it's still evolving. Every day it's evolving.
I love it. I think on my journey, I've become a general counsel. I realized two things that were very important. One is that as a general counsel, you usually report to CEO. And I realized that my network was CEO poor. And so I realized that people who are in position to extend me that job don't know that I exist. And so that set out a journey of intentional networking with CEOs. And the second thing I realized is that general counsel generally know a lot more about openings in the general counsel market. Just like when I was at a law firm, I knew a lot about who's hiring at which law firm. And when I was in-house lawyer, I had a lot of information about kind of mid-level positions as well. And so now working with other general counsel, I realized that my network was general counsel poor again, and networking for that position was something that I did intentionally as well. Though my first general counsel position, I've gained neither from the CEO nor from another general counsel, ironically enough. But I did feel that this was actually very helpful in learning to get there. Let's talk about the ABA's in-house portion. This is something that ABA not historically sort of known for. Tell us more about the I think is it a chapter or is it division? How does ABA think about it and what does it do?
Yeah. So there's sections, and the story is actually, I could tell it a couple different ways. I'll tell the long version. You cut me off when I start getting too monologue-y. But it really kind of goes to the power of saying yes is where all this started. Just like with this interview with you, Olga, I'd never done a video interview, so I almost said no, but I was like, okay, just step out there, say yes, it'll be fine. You're going to survive.
You're doing great. And you're looking great. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was invited to do a presentation for Broadridge about virtual annual shareholder meetings during the COVID craze where everybody was switching. If you remember all that time, it was chaotic, and we had done it and navigated the waters with Broadridge. And so I was coming on as the in-house perspective. The firm lawyer, Frank Placenti, who was presenting on more of the substantive stuff, he and I kicked it off before the presentation began, and we're just cutting it up and kind of getting in trouble with the people who are trying to keep things on the track. But we just hit it off. A couple days after the presentation, he emailed and asked me to join. He was forming for the ABA Corporate Governance Committee an in-house subcommittee because of exactly what you said, that it's been historically poor on reaching the in-house lawyers. So he wanted to try to change that. And so I said yes. And then I shared with him the idea of reaching out to GCs, and he loved it. And so connected me with the ABA publishing folks, and it's kind of the rest is history. But it all came from saying yes to one invitation that led to another, that led to another, that led to this. So it's been a fun ride.
Oh, I love it. And saying yes is a really underrated quality. And I think it's very important. Thank you for bringing it up. That led to podcasts that you're doing. I've historically been asked to do podcasts. And for a long time, I actually said no, because it's actually quite a lot of work to find great folks and get them to the point that you can have a great conversation and then record it and then actually release it into the wild in a way that is listenable and exciting. So how have your experiences been so far?
Well, I mean, I'm about as green as they come. I mean, I Googled like, what mic should I use? The first one, I used just my headset I use for work. And that was the Chad Perry episode that just dropped this week. And the audio is horrible. But, it's been a learning experience, and being able to talk to folks like you, Olga, who do it a lot. The community, the podcast community is fantastic. It's still kind of in its beginning stage relatively as a medium. And so everybody is very open to help and give you comments and critiques. And it's been a great experience. I do say the ABA has a production company that helps us. So with the music and editing and all that. So thankfully I don't have to do that side, because it would be a complete failure if I did. It's been a great experience so far, a really wonderful way. I mean, we wouldn't be talking right now if I wouldn't have stepped out.
Yeah, I resisted for a long time, but I started doing podcasts in pandemic because, I had this extra time, I thought. And so I picked up a few hobbies, and it's been very interesting. I've learned quite a lot and met a lot of really great people and had some really enlightening conversations. And I'm grateful every time that I have a chance to learn. What is your sort of biggest learnings since you started doing it?
Yeah, I think, you identified several points that are the most challenging. And I think the most challenging, particularly in the GC space, has been finding folks who are willing to spend their time and then actually scheduling and having that scheduled time work. I think everyone I've had to reschedule, except maybe the first one, a couple times. And then there'll be tech issues on my side. So, I think the biggest challenge is kind of the tech side of it and just availability and the scheduling. So if I could get some help there, that'd be wonderful.
Do you find that in-house lawyers are open-minded about kind of being front and center, sharing about their experiences, having interviews like this? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's interesting. I have met the folks that have been on my show have been extremely gracious and generous, but I do think it is a pretty good observation that maybe the in-house community is a little more reluctant than the outside counsel, because we have one client, right? Many clients and one client, but you really do have to be careful as you talk about your experiences not going too far. And it's funny watching some episodes where you're like, wonder if they went a little too far. So I do think there may be something there to what you're saying, Olga.
Yeah, I've seen, because I one of the main reasons why I started was writing, because writing is sort of, you can proofread, double check, double click, get permission. And I didn't have to show up fully, so to speak. It gave me a little bit more control. Is that, I think that attitude of in-house lawyer actually speaking up publicly, I think that is an idea that is still being shaped. We are historically sort of behind the scenes, the trusted advisors. That also sometimes means that we don't actually do the front and center leadership and speaking up. That's somebody else's job. And because you can sort of reverse engineer into sort of things that are not public, because we have few clients and they are well known who they are. So I've definitely seen that in-house lawyers sort of that discretion part is amplified. Though I've also seen that since I've been doing it now for over a decade, I've seen a lot of transformation, and there are definitely in-house lawyers who are much more comfortable speaking up. And yes, there is still quite a lot that still reluctant and really, the live conversation is harder for them, and even the podcast because it's really hard to edit. You can cut things out, but you can't kind of change words. So it's not as micro changes as you can. So I definitely think that there's some of that. Let's talk about becoming the general counsel and kind of the things that you've learned from your guests. What kind of surprised you the most in your conversation that you thought, oh, wow, that's a good tip. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've observed is just how many, and you said it up top, how many paths there are to becoming a general counsel. I'd kind of had it in my mind, you're a corporate and securities lawyer, and then at least in the public context, and you flip up. But, Jackie Lee, one of my guests who's fantastic, was a litigator in the IP space and made her way to GC. So I've been really interested on how many paths there are to get there.
I was an IP litigator once, so I can definitely tell you can become
maybe that's the other path.
You can definitely become a general counsel from that path. And I agree with you. What I did was I drove around the Bay Area and I interviewed over 100 general counsel about their past, and then I wrote and kind of those interviews, asked them to take a look, make sure that they're okay with sharing, and published it on ACC at the time. And the number one inspiring thing for me is this tapestry, the richness of the past that you can get there. And I think that for me that was very liberating, because I thought there's sort of just one way, and there are many, many ways, and you can kind of find yourself in those ways. I think it was very empowering to hear those stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about kind of characteristics or skills to acquire, what you can proactively do to kind of, position yourself to get into the destination of becoming the general counsel.
Yeah, the one thing that everybody put up top as a priority is communication. Studying your audience, being able to communicate to a board is very different than being able to communicate to your SME and security. So Chad Perry put it, you've got to be able to pivot from 30,000 feet to 5 feet on just a snap. And I thought that was really, really great. And I think that's been the biggest skill that I think wherever you are, you can start to cultivate and develop.
So how do you actually develop that skill? Do you have any thoughts? I guess being in the boardroom is one, but, it's certainly not the skill that I've been taught in law school.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I think you're right. And it kind of goes to the other, one of the tips for being an aspiring GC is, look in your current role for stretch opportunities, and communication is a great space. So if you are in a legal department or even at a firm, looking for opportunities to speak to the board and make a presentation at a board, attend a board meeting to take minutes. I think exposing yourself, particularly to that audience, because it's a very, as you know, very particular skill set to be able to effectively, high level, concisely communicate complex concepts to a board. I think doing it, getting reps, like anything else, is the best path.
Yeah, I agree with you. I found that your current general counsel may or may not be open-minded about mentoring you right. to become the general counsel. I found that getting mentorship from outside the organization, was also very helpful, and I kind of adopted those 100 plus general counsel as my mentors. I didn't even ask them. I sort of decided that they were, and I learned from them, and that was very helpful. Are there any other tips that you think are helpful in your general counsel journey?
Yeah, I think one thing that I thought was interesting. I posed the question to everybody. As you move up in the general counsel role, Do you think it's more important to still be a good lawyer, or does it become more about being a business executive? And they really harped on, you have to be an excellent lawyer first. That's not it, but be an excellent lawyer. So I think it's always honing your craft, deepening your expertise, and also building capabilities outside of your main area of expertise. Because as general counsel, as you know, you have to be able to learn quickly. You have to be able to at least know enough to engage with your experts in-house or outside counsel. So I think developing your skills as a lawyer.
Very interesting. I want to talk about sort of the talent management aspect of it, hiring, recruiting, retaining high caliber people. I actually do think that being number one lawyer, I've had both number one and number two lawyer job. And I when I was number two lawyer, I was really much more on the cutting edge of the law, where as a general counsel, I was sort of much more in the sort of executive conversations. So I actually think they're very different jobs. And yes, legal skills are table stakes, but I think they're fundamentally different jobs, and not necessarily one better than the other. I think they're different. And I think it's some jobs are better for some people than others. But what I also find in every executive role, now I've had a few, I had the general counsel role, I had the VP of strategy role, now the CEO role, that kind of cultivating, retaining, recruiting, talent and managing is sort of another skill that is, you're not born with it. It's something you develop. And it's not taught in law school. And I find as a lawyer, very few lawyers manage teams, let alone large teams. Yeah. So I found it, as a number two lawyer, I found it, because I was thinking, how do I acquire that skills? I don't have a big team to manage. My peers in other functions, actually have much bigger team and become much more experienced managers than I am by the time they're at my level. So how are you thinking about that leadership management skills? And those are not obviously the same skills, but how are you thinking about leadership and management?
Yeah, I think the biggest insight I gleaned was from Brady Long, who I think will be dropping today. He really emphasized the human element of leading a team, being the boss. And he phrased it as always striving to be a good partner for those who you report to, who report up to you, your service providers. And that really spoke to me because I think, scaling management from a team of 5 to 100, clearly there's technical aspects to it, but the principle of everyone's a person and looking out for their best interest, helping them grow and excel, mentoring. I think that was the one thing from Brady that really I took away and really meant a lot to me.
Imagining what the destination looks like. Yeah. What does a successful legal team or business team or tech team look like, and then sort of backing into it. And that's because sometimes, as it's sort of in startup speak, building a plane as you're flying it, it's a little hard.
Yeah. And, I think, MLA has a really Duck Trang at MLA. I'll just give him a shout out. He's wonderful at helping think through those things about here's your current state, here's your desired end state, here's a roadmap to get there. I think having some help to that end, because I think you're right, Olga, we're not trained in law school to think like that. We read cases, prepare arguments. So I think getting some help is good.
Yeah, I actually distinctly remember when I was number two lawyer, we were preparing to go public, and for all executives and senior leadership, we had executive coaching.
Yeah,
and I can't say that I naturally gravitate toward coaching, but that was provided to me, and actually was completely life changing in my case, and was very helpful. I highly recommend that. I don't think leadership or executive skills are natural to many, at least to the extent you're born with it, but they become second nature by learning. And I found that was very helpful in my journey.
And you think about it when you're growing up playing sports, you always have a coach. And really our sport now in law is law. And so it makes sense. Why would it be any different as a leader, as a lawyer, to have somebody coaching you, cheering you on, helping you, letting you see your blind spots? Makes total sense. I'm a big believer as well.
Yeah. Julie Brush, as the lawyer's whisperer, compares lawyers, especially those high achieving lawyers, to sort of Olympians, because they are sort of the, perfected their craft to the point that, in their field, they are on top of their game. They are sort of Olympians equivalent. And you don't get to that level by yourself. It does take a lot of intentional steps, and getting help along the way is definitely an important one. So before we wrap up, curious, maybe give us a preview of what interviews are coming, who is going to be on your show next, what should we expect, where we can find it, how they would tune in.
Yeah. So got some really interesting interviews coming up, still nailing down dates and final, confirmation. So some more to come on that. You can find it on the ABA website. I should know off the top of the head where that is. That would have made total sense. But maybe we can put it in the show notes or somewhere. I can share that. But yeah,
it is actually already in show notes.
Oh, okay, perfect. In the show notes. But yeah, we're still going to go. Going to try to take it as long as as we can. And then there's an idea to turn it into a book, kind of like you did, Olga. So I'd be interested in reading your work on the back end with lessons learned. Really
cool. Well, David, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It makes my heart beat a little faster when I see in-house lawyers taking proactive steps, sharing lessons, being generous. It's just really makes me proud to be the former general counsel in-house lawyer, and call that my tribe. So thank you so much for setting the example for doing that, and inspiring other in-house leaders to publicly share their lessons and help each other. Before we leave, what is one or two things you want to leave the audience with that you think will either help them in their general counsel journey, or frankly, their podcasting journey, whichever, or both?
Yeah, I think, like we said, the power of yes. All this started with one yes for me, and you never know that's going to lead. Get out of your comfort zone. I'm so uncomfortable right now, but it's good. It's growing. And then, check out the podcast. Say it out loud that you want to be a general counsel. There's nothing wrong with that. You've got a lot of people who share that ambition and are on your side.
Really cool. Well, thank you so much for joining. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Olga. I appreciate it.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Two things. A couple of takeaways. One is that say yes. It is a very powerful thing to do. No's are powerful. Yes are powerful as well. Definitely consider saying them intentionally. Two is that general counsel are not born. You become one. It's a journey. There are multiple ways to get there. Tune in for David's podcast. I really love the idea of sharing those notes and tips publicly. And I'm really happy that the ABA is really actively embracing in-house lawyers and helping them to become the visible leaders that they are. As you know, guests on my podcast are nominated by you. So if you have ideas of who is the in-house leader you want to hear from, learn from, get the insight, let me know. And if that in-house leader is you, definitely nominate yourself. I encourage self-nomination. There is nothing wrong with raising your hand saying, I want to be the general counsel. There is nothing wrong with raising your hand and saying, I have insights I can share. I am definitely more than open to that idea. And every guest we've had in 3 seasons now have been nominated by you, and sometimes self-nominated, again, which I encourage. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.